This video is brought to you by Manscaped.com. We can all agree that we, the MMA community, definitely need a good trimming and downstairs cleaning. Manscaped will solve those problems. The only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene, with the perfect tools for your family jewels, a quick answer to your knacker disaster, and the only equipment to clean undercover fulfillment. I mean, I got my own, and it makes life way more refreshing. I got hooked up with the Perfect Package 3.0 kit that comes with the best trimmer in the business, the Lawnmower 3.0. With a 7,000 RPM motor and a rapid charging dock. It's cordless, it's waterproof, perfect for in the shower, and it's the only trimmer on the market made by advanced skin safe technology. Take away all the annoyances, the nicks, the cuts that you get from other brands. With the Lawnmower 3000, you also get your own deodorant and toner. For a limited time, you also get 2 free gifts. Yes, they're free. The Shed Travel Bag and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxing Briefs, which is extremely comfortable. You get all of this by going to Manscaped.com today, where you get 20% free plus free international shipping with these 2 free gifts when you use the promo code WEASEL at manscaped.com. I'm telling you, your body will thank you. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the MMA meeting. Let's Talk with Weasel podcast, where we talk all things MMA, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day. A lot is coming out of that UFC 260 card, specifically around Jon Jones. But first of all, Stipe Miocic is fine. Put out a response afterward. He's very humble in defeat. He knows he needs to get better, and he's going to come back. There's some people who are contemplating that he is going to retire. Seems like he has the fire to come back and show up better than he was before, which is a really good thing. He understands the mistakes he made against Ngannou. He understood that he lost composure and tried to chase a knockout. He showed great durability throughout the fight. The only guy to really take those kind of big shots and not get knocked out. I mean, Curtis Blaydes the first time took a lot of big shots from Francis and didn't go away at all. But Stipe took horrendous damage in that first round and then in the beginning of the second. The time he got knocked out is where he did not see the punch coming and came in completely defenseless. I'm still shocked at Ngannou's performance, man. Not necessarily shocked at his boxing technique or his patience, because, again, I did talk about that for weeks before the fight, that Ngannou has become very patient and his boxing has gotten a lot better. He showed the leg kicks I was talking about. He showed great takedown defense I was talking about before. The place that still shocks me today and even gives me goosebumps when I think about it, Ngannou's wrestling skills way surpassed my expectations completely. He sprawled very well. He used the underhooks very well. He shoved in the head well. His balance was impeccable. And then spinning on top and reversing the position, getting Stipe on his back using actual technique instead of muscling him to the ground. That was the part that shocked me beyond belief, man. Because if Francis Ngannou learns how to wrestle even better than he showed against Stipe, because nobody out-wrestles Stipe besides DC, if Ngannou starts blasting double legs on people and getting him to the ground that way, he becomes a multi-dimensional fighter where you have to worry about his wrestling as well as his striking. His ground and pound is going to be terrifying if he really amps up his wrestling. There is nobody that's going to beat him unless he makes some huge mistake in the fight. If Ngannou can take down everybody in this division, I just don't see, without him slipping up in a fight, I just don't see how he's going to lose. He doesn't have to be that skilled of a wrestler. He doesn't have to be some Olympian or something like that. He has the strength and the athleticism to cover that skill ground. So for instance, if he is going to fight Derek Lewis, who doesn't have the best takedown defense, and he starts blasting double legs on him, that is going to be huge for Francis in the future, because when he goes up against guys like Ciryl Gane, who's a kickboxer, don't really know too much about his takedown defense, and takes him to the ground, where a lot of people think Ciryl Gane is a better striker. He's more technical. Derek Lewis has the power and the heart to come back in the fight and knock Ngannou out at any given moment. As soon as the fight gets away from a striking match and Ngannou starts implementing his wrestling, there's no striker that's going to beat him. And there's probably no wrestler that's going to beat him, because he just beat the best wrestler in the division and out-wrestled him in the fight. He did it before with Curtis Blaydes twice. He did it against Cain Velasquez. If those guys are not able to take him to the ground, nobody is going to take him to the ground. DC, if he came back, let's just say hypothetically, he would be the only guy that would be able to somewhat wrestle with Ngannou because of his different style of wrestling. He's very tricky with his wrestling. He chain wrestles very well. He switches angles. He switches takedowns mid-exchange, and that is not something that Stipe Miocic does. When Stipe wrestles, he likes to go for the single, and he hangs onto the single until the end of the sequence. DC doesn't necessarily do that. So Ngannou is very focused on one single takedown attempt, right? He's very good at zoning in his focus on one single takedown. When you mix that up on him and overload the data with multiple takedown attempts in one chain, I don't know if Ngannou is going to be able to keep up with that. That's just in theory. We haven't seen Ngannou have to deal with something like that, and we probably will never have to see him deal with something like that, which is great for his future, unless he fights Jon Jones. But that's the other question coming into it. And I see some people talking about that Stipe coming in too light costed him the fight. I don't think so, man. I really don't think so, because in the first fight, again, Ngannou stuffed multiple takedowns in that first round, and he was super aggressive doing it, which makes him more vulnerable to takedowns. When he's patient like this, Stipe was not going to take him to the ground. He needed to get something out of Ngannou so he can counter with a takedown, or take down Ngannou when Ngannou's tired. Like I said in my breakdown of Francis Ngannou, if Ngannou's not tired, and if he's not aggressive, he's not going to get taken to the ground, because we've never seen him get taken to the ground under other circumstances, even against Stipe in the first fight. So no, I don't think the size changed anything. In fact, I think a lighter Stipe is better to fight Francis Ngannou. Because of the speed factor, he keeps his power, he has faster hands, faster head movement, he's fresher in the fight, he's going to have better cardio. Why be bigger against Francis? What does that really do for you? Stipe still showed a tremendous chin. His chin did not get deteriorated at all. He will have the power, but he'll never have the power to knock out Ngannou with one punch. So there is no point of actually gaining weight. I can see where the weight can help his wrestling, but again, in the first fight, it didn't help it to that extent. Not the way that this fight went down. No matter how much Stipe weighs, Ngannou is going to be much stronger than him. So might as well just get faster with better cardio. Don't go the power route. Don't go the physicality route. Go the speed route. Go the technical route. And this goes into the Jon Jones discussion, as well as who is actually the hardest opponent for Francis Ngannou, because it seems like now Ngannou is going to be a future superstar. If he takes out heavyweights left and right in seconds and knocks them out in devastating fashion the way he's been doing, there's going to be a highlight reel where all the casual fans are going to take note. And before you know it, he's going to have like 700,000 pay-per-view buy cards. And he wants to be super active, which is amazing. That is the new trend of MMA. Before, it was just like chasing money and stuff like that. But then when Hamza Chimaev bursted onto the scene and he started fighting like every weekend, or at least he wanted to, Israel Adesanya tried to fight like 5 times a year, Kevin Holland fighting constantly, these guys grew a big following quickly because of that. Francis Ngannou wants to do the same thing as a champion, and that's not something we normally get to see from a champion. Champions usually take a long time between fights. Ngannou wants to come back in the summer no matter who it is. He wants to fight Jon Jones, he wants to fight Derek Lewis, whoever it's going to be, he wants to go up against them. Derek Lewis is all up for, so he will definitely be ready for the summer. I don't know if Jon Jones will be, and if Ngannou gets like 3 or 4 big knockouts as a champion in one single year, I see right after that he is going to be a huge star. Especially with the guys he potentially can knock out, like a Jon Jones, like a Derek Lewis. That will do huge for his career. Now, let's talk about this Jon Jones fight. For those who've been following me for years now, back in 2018, I think it was March of 2018, where I first talked about Ngannou versus Jon Jones on one of my previous podcast episodes. And way back then, 3 years ago, I have been saying that Francis Ngannou would beat Jon Jones. For the same reasons I think today. But now, with Francis getting much better and it looks like Jones has plateaued, I think Ngannou has a bigger chance of beating Jon Jones, to be honest here. Because I've actually seen that he can offensively wrestle, he's very strong in the clinch, even compared to Stipe Miocic, who probably is stronger than Jones. His physicality is too much. He's too powerful for Jones. He has the same reach practically. Jones is very comfortable at fighting at a distance, and when he's fighting up against a guy who can meet him at that distance, every time Jones attacks, Ngannou can attack at the same time and catch Jones. When Jones comes up against guys who are his size, his reach, all that stuff, he just historically, it's factual, he has a harder time against them. And it's for that reason. He can't just pick at you from a distance constantly, unless you start to gas out the way Dominic Reyes did. Jones has to rely on more of his fundamentals from that distance with boxing defense, guarding up, all that stuff, and that is not going to be a great thing against Francis Ngannou. Ngannou also has big leg kicks that Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos showed that Jones is very susceptible to. Jones is also not the best blast double leg or single leg takedown artist. He is very good in the clinch using his Greco-Roman style. When he's up in the clinch with Francis, he's going to meet that strength harder than anybody else ever did. There is, of course, still the manipulation of balance that Jones could potentially get on Francis by tripping him out and stuff like that and baiting him to step into traps. But as we've seen with Alistair Overeem, for an example, he turned over Overeem in the clinch instantly. I just don't see Jon Jones taking down Ngannou in the clinch, to be honest. And if he's not going to be able to do that, I know he's not going to be able to blast double leg him if guys like Stipe can't do it. He can't single leg him if guys like Stipe can't do it, in my opinion. So that leads in the striking. Even if Jones is the more technical striker, Jones does have slow feet, and Ngannou can touch Jones at every range. That is a big difference between someone like Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane's very quick on his feet. He can move in and out and get away from the big punches. Jones is going to have a hard time doing that, as solid as his defense can be sometimes. His boxing defense is very open to big power shots from a guy like Francis. If Francis can take off angles and even switch stances and find that big left hand, Jones cannot post and retreat like he's always been doing. Whenever people try to get in on him and be aggressive, he posts and retreats, picks his left hand up, right hand in your face if he's southpaw, and he moves away. That is not going to work against Francis Ngannou. You're going to have to need a reach advantage, or you're going to need to be much faster and see the punch coming early in order to use that kind of defense effectively. That also does leave his legs exposed. Just like Francis has been feinting up and going for leg kicks for some time against Curtis Blaydes, against JDS, and now against Stipe in the rematch. If he feints up high, throws a jab in Jon Jones' face, Jones pulls some retreats. There's the big leg kick. Jones is not going to see the leg kick coming. It's going to cause even more damage. Jones has very small legs as it is. Taking a beating like that to the leg when you're not expecting it, once 2 or 3 leg kicks land, it's going to cause some tremendous damage, man. And if Jones wants to get on the offensive and throw some of his punches or throw some of his kicks, he gets in further danger every time he does this. A patient Ngannou is going to wait on his openings, and Jon Jones overextends with his punches. You saw this specifically in the Gustafsson 2 fight. If that was Francis Ngannou in front of Jones and Jones is swinging at him like that, he is going to get countered. As we've seen throughout Ngannou's entire career, that check left hook is super quick, man. He just knocked out Stipe with it as well. He did it in JDS where he followed up with the right uppercut afterward. He did it before against Andrei Arlovski. That is going to be a huge weapon against Jon Jones if Jones wants to be somewhat aggressive. The thing that gives Jon Jones a big chance of winning this fight is his fight IQ generally. We don't know how he's going to show up, so that is going to be an X factor, but the guy is super smart, man. He makes things work. He finds openings on the opponent that nobody else really does. Jones' fight IQ is his biggest asset. So I would not put it past Jones to find something on Ngannou that nobody else really seen and him starting to exploit it inside the fight. And no, Jones is not scared. There's no way he's scared of Francis Ngannou. That all comes into the whole business aspect of this. Jon Jones wants to get paid, and rightfully so. He should get paid. Jon Jones is at a level where he should not be making less than $10 million a fight, in my opinion. Steroids is not going to impact your pay, so we can just comfortably say, for the sake of getting paid, that Jon Jones is one of the greatest of all time. He's done so much in the UFC. He was a long-time champion, and he's coming up a division for the first time and fighting the scariest guy in the world who could potentially knock him out, who's probably the worst matchup for him in the entire UFC. He understands the risks, and he wants to get paid for the risk that he would take. So in that sense, yes, man, Jon Jones should get paid. I understand where he's going to be upset that the UFC is probably not going to give him what he wants. Then again, we don't know what he's asking for. If he's asking for $100 million, I don't know where they're going to get that, right? I don't know where they're going to get that out of the fight. Unless the pay-per-view sells like $2 million, I don't know where Jon Jones is going to get $100 million. If he is asking for that, I don't think he would, but that is like the only illogical part of this. If he's asking for like 10 to 20 million, he deserves that. As a base pay, probably not, because they don't even give Conor McGregor that kind of base. Conor gets like, what, 3 million as a base? But in terms of the pay-per-view, he's going to get pay-per-view numbers. He's going to get the majority of the pay-per-view numbers out of that main event. If it sells like 1 million, which I think it probably can, Jones should come out of there with over $10 million if it sells over 1 million, I think, and he gets like a base pay of 2 million, let's just say. That seems logical for Jon Jones coming into this fight, but I don't know if the UFC wants to do that because I don't think Jones ever made that kind of money before. And they have other options. They have Derek Lewis. That's a big fight for Francis as well. They'll do some good numbers on pay-per-view. They have other guys in line, and they have a light heavyweight champ that Jon Jones can come back to face. Because Jan Blachowicz was part of a card that did big numbers on pay-per-view against Israel Adesanya. So even though he didn't get all that, he didn't get all those fans on his side, Jan will probably sell like 400,000 in his next fight, which is actually pretty good for a guy who just became a champion and never had a following before, right? That's like Stipe Miocic numbers. If Jones comes back down and fights him, it probably amp up to 700,000 at least. So that's also a pretty big fight for Jon Jones. But he's trying to negotiate his way to get better pay, and I do not fault him at all for this. I don't think it's a way that he's scared in a fight. I don't think that tells any of that. It's just part of the game where Dana's saying that Jones probably doesn't want to take this fight. He has been working. He's been getting a lot bigger. He weighs like, what, 250, 260? And I do hear people saying that he expected Stipe to win. That's why he gained the weight, and now he's making it hard for himself. I do think that Jones will ask for more pay to fight Francis than to fight Stipe. I do believe that because there's more risk. And now knowing how Francis looked in front of Stipe, it's more logical to think that Jon is going to ask for more pay now because Stipe was a more favorable fight. And I guess kind of breaking news, Jon Jones is saying that $7 to $10 million is too low. I can understand where the UFC is not going to make this. I can understand where they're just going to turn him down for that. I think he should earn more, but I don't know how they can promise him $10 million. Again, base pay of $10 million is unheard of in the UFC. No one has that, not even Conor, not even Khabib. He could get more than that with the pay-per-view points. But it does seem like Jon Jones is overpricing himself when it comes to what he knows about the UFC. And the UFC is not sweating it, man. They're just going to go to someone else. They're going to go straight to Derek Lewis. This is one part that's wrong with one promoter owning all the fighters. They can always get another fighter to take the fight for lesser pay. Whereas in boxing, because there's so many promoters, you don't necessarily get that. It's a big reason why you don't get the fights you want to see, because they're always battling it out in the negotiations. But at least the top guys in boxing are all going to get paid. In the UFC, they always have a fighter who's going to take up that fight for lesser pay, which is why they're never going to sweat this kind of situation. This goes into the argument that I was having the other day. Who is Ngannou's hardest fight? Is it Jon Jones? Is it Derek Lewis? Is it still Stipe? Or is it someone else? I personally think his hardest fight is Ciryl Gane. I am excluding Jon Jones for the moment because I don't know how he looks at heavyweight. So I can't say for sure what I think about Jon Jones' skills at heavyweight. So looking at Stipe, Gane, and Lewis, I know how all of them fight in the heavyweight division. I think Ciryl Gane is the toughest matchup. There are different factors involved. So attributes-wise, Ciryl Gane's powerful, not as powerful as Ngannou obviously, but he's faster than Ngannou, and he's just as long and just as tall. Exact same reach and exact same height. That is going to play a factor in this. He's going to be able to pull away from Ngannou's punches, just like he's fighting a guy his same size. The speed factor is also going to play a part in that, where he's going to be able to get away from punches better than Ngannou is going to be able to get away from his punches. So there's that, and then it comes to the skill. We all know Ciryl Gane's a more technical fighter. He's way better as a striker, technically. Different variety of attacks, many kicks, he switches stances more frequently than Ngannou does. That creates different targets and different angles for him to attack and to retreat from. Ngannou throwing the right hand is not going to be the same when he's fighting a southpaw Ciryl Gane compared to an orthodox Ciryl Gane. And Gane is a strategic fighter. He fights on a game plan. He's very smart in the cage. He never loses composure whether he hurts you or not. We've seen this throughout his entire UFC career so far. Even as inexperienced as he is, he has shown a level of composure that veterans of the sport show. And Ngannou showed it in his last fight. Gane has also showed it in his last fight against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is a very powerful striker who can knock out anybody with one punch. He had no worriness at all. Very easy for him to handle someone like that, to get away from the power punches and put a jabbing clinic on the guy. He could do the same thing to Francis Ngannou. I will not be shocked at all if Ciryl Gane shuts out Ngannou completely in the striking. I don't think that would happen. I do think Ngannou would beat Ciryl Gane, but I would not be surprised at all. There comes Francis Ngannou's chin, where he will be able to take almost anything that Gane can deliver. But can he do that for 5 rounds? Can he get peppered in the face by jabs and kick to the legs and kick to the body for 5 rounds? I don't think so, man. Gane is someone who will attack. He's not going to be like Stipe Miocic, who's going to be waiting for everything Ngannou is going to do. If he sees an opening, he's going to pick at it from a distance and then retreat immediately. That is something Stipe never does. Stipe is an all-in attacker where he takes off angles, right? He attacks, pivots on an angle, and then gets away. He doesn't step forward with a jab and then back up immediately. Stipe's pull counters come from still position, or when he's backpedaling. It's never when he's moving forward and then he pulls and counters you. But that is something that Ciryl Gane will do. Gane will pop a jab in Ngannou's face, and Gane will look to counter with a left hook. Gane pulls back on it and counters him with a longer right hook in the southpaw stance, and then move out immediately. So yes, I do think Ngannou can walk through many punches, but he cannot do that for the entire duration of the fight. I don't think he can even do it for 3 rounds, to be honest. And that comes the whole footwork aspect of it. Ciryl Gane is the best mover in the entire division. He's the most elusive guy, the fastest guy in the division when it comes to footwork. That is something Ngannou never fights in his career. He's never fought someone who can move like that. He's fought him in the training room, and that's the X factor coming into that. They both train with each other for a long time, so they understand each other a lot more. That is going to play a bigger factor for Ciryl Gane, I think, because usually fighters get a little bit intimidated of Ngannou's power, so they fight him a little bit differently than everybody else. Gane has felt this for years. He's so used to Ngannou's power, or used to that threat that's in front of him, that I think he's going to be more composed than anybody else Ngannou's ever fought. Vice versa, Ngannou can pick at some of the speed advantages that Gane has and find a game plan around that so he can probably attack the legs a little bit more and stuff like that. But Gane is not an easy guy to leg kick. He moves around too quickly. And the thing about Ngannou is, he still throws looping punches. They're going to be very obvious for Gane to see. The trickiness about Ngannou's punches is when he sets them up with jabs. Like he went for the triple jab on Stipe Miocic, the last one went to the body to find the big right overhand. Those are the kind of attacks that are going to give someone like Ciryl Gane problems. But I just don't know if Ngannou is going to be able to catch up to him with those combinations, right? Because Ciryl Gane is going to be somewhat of an opportunistic matador, in a sense. Like, he's going to be moving away, he's going to be looking to counter Ngannou's attacks, but if an opening presents itself, Gane is going to fire. Not with power punches, but just picking at Ngannou, just like he did against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Exact same thing. And I do dismiss the whole claim that Ngannou can do Ciryl Gane the way he did Jairzinho Rozenstruik. There's no way. Unless Gane freezes up in front of him, Gane has the movement, the footwork, the angles, the switching of stances, the jab, even threatening for a takedown. He has all of that stuff to get away from a blitz from Francis Ngannou. all of that stuff. He actually does attempt takedowns. He's done it in almost every single fight so far. Whether he gets a takedown or not, he can threaten with them, right? He can make Ngannou think, okay, maybe I can't rush him recklessly because he does have that double leg takedown and he rises to the clinch. Gane is very strong there as well. He's not going to be as strong as Ngannou, but he should be able to hold his own better than most guys in the division due to his kickboxing and Muay Thai background. So Ciryl Gane, be the more technical fighter, be able to counter and move better than anybody in the entire division, is the reason why I do think that Ciryl Gane is Ngannou's hardest fight in the heavyweight division. Now, some people say Derek Lewis. This is like an opposite argument that you can make from Ciryl Gane because Derek Lewis is not technical. In fact, Ngannou's more technical. Ngannou's the better athlete. He has a better chin, and he's more powerful. He has pretty much everything better than Derek Lewis, other than the fact that Derek Lewis just finds a way to connect that right hand when he's losing the fight. He's losing every single fight until he finds the big right hand. Now that comes into a question. How is he losing these fights? When he fights Curtis Blaydes and Volkov and guys like that, he's getting outstruck for the most part. He's getting peppered, punched in the face, kick to the body, kick to the legs, up until like second, third round where he finds the big right overhand where the opponent makes a big mistake. Can he take that kind of punishment from Francis? Can he risk, quote-unquote, losing the fight up until he finds the big right overhand? If he's, quote-unquote, losing the fight to Francis, that means he's probably going to get knocked out. Losing the fight to Francis means you're going to get hit. And when you get hit by Francis, you're probably going to be out. Now, there is a possibility that Ngannou rushes in and gets caught by the big right hand. That's always a possibility whenever you're fighting Derek Lewis. But, man, I just don't see that happening. It's too much of a puncher's chance to really bank on something like that. This is how I pretty much sum it up. I think fighting Ngannou strategically, being as technical as possible, fighting him on points for 5 rounds, is more effective than trying to knock him out. Derek Lewis is going to try to knock him out. Is trying to knock out Ngannou really that effective? Is it really the best plan? I think trying to fight Ngannou, being strategic as possible, going through 5 rounds, point fighting him is the best way to fight him. On the feet at least. That is why I do think the technical fighter in Ciryl Gane is a harder fight than the powerful fighter that is Derek Lewis. You can be powerful, but you're not going to be more powerful than Ngannou. And to be honest, I do think Ngannou is going to fight Derek Lewis. I don't know if the Jon Jones fight is going to happen, to be honest. It seems like with some of Jon Jones' recent tweets, he's been saying that he wants to get cut from the UFC. He said he's fed up with the UFC. He says, just let me go. It looks like the negotiations have happened, and it didn't turn out well for Jon Jones, as a lot of people probably predicted. Well, that's kind of unfortunate if that's the case, man. But the UFC has many fights to put on. They don't need Jon Jones versus Ngannou. I mean, look how many super fights they had in the past that never happened. This is just another one. So it's probably going to be Ngannou versus Lewis. Jon Jones does what he wants. I don't know if he's going to lose the weight that he gained or he's going to try his hand at heavyweight against someone else. He could fight Ciryl Gane. Why not that? Why not try that? He gained all the weight. He trained to be a heavyweight for so long now. He's just going to give that up and lose the weight and come back down to 205. It's all Jon Jones' decision at this point. I'm happy for either. Jan Blachowicz versus Jon will be interesting. Ciryl Gane versus Jon is very interesting as well. Did you guys hear about Tony Ferguson now? Tony Ferguson has been training with Freddie Roach, right? Big change to his training camp. He was the head coach. He was the guy that was coming up with all the training regimens. He was the one that bringing guys in and bringing in the coaches that he wants for specific different martial arts. So training with Freddie Roach is a little bit different. What's a lot different now is he's also training with GSP. Yeah, that's right. He's training with GSP too. What? That's crazy, man. That actually gets me super excited about his fight. I don't know how that's going to change his style because Tony Ferguson is an innovator. He has a creative mind. And that's one of the biggest assets to his game. With a more structured training camp, with structured coaches, I don't know how that's going to change the way he fights, honestly. Part of me actually doesn't like it because I like the creativeness that Tony Ferguson brings into a fight, but maybe that's not the best way to fight nowadays, given how he lost to guys like Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira, who kept it very basic on him, very fundamental. They pretty much beat him with the fundamentals. So maybe bringing back the basics to his game that he had in the welterweight division, maybe that's the way to go these days. I have no idea. But I'm super excited about his fight with Beneil Dariush now. Imagine he starts using his wrestling now because he's training with GSP. Finds that blast double leg, starts offensively wrestle like he's never done before. We never see Tony Ferguson try to take opponents to the ground. Maybe it's time to go back to his roots, just like Glover Teixeira did. Look at some of these older guys in the UFC. Some of them are doing better now because they're sticking to the basics. They're sticking to what they do best. Glover Teixeira is the perfect example of that. He stopped boxing with his opponents and he starts taking them to the ground and using his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Tony Ferguson should try to wrestle more now. Have the funkiness in his striking, but wrestle more. And now let's go right to your guys' questions. And we're going to start with the most liked comments by K. Idea for a series. Would you be able to do predictions or rundowns on fights that never happen? DC versus Brock Lesnar, Jon Jones versus Anthony Johnson, or what if fights like Prime GSP versus 5th round Robbie Lawler? If you guys are interested, I could try it out. I can give you a quick rundown on those fights right now. So I think DC destroys Brock Lesnar. He can deal with the wrestling. He's a far better striker. Brock Lesnar is not the best at reacting to punches necessarily. He's not very composed under fire. DC's much faster. I think he'll have better cardio as well. Yeah, I think DC would dominate Brock Lesnar, to be honest. John Jones versus Anthony Johnson. That fight was so anticipated back in the day. Given what I know about Anthony Johnson now and the fact that he does kind of give up on himself when things get tough, I think John Jones would beat him, and I think he would beat him pretty easily, to be honest. The wrestling would be so big there. I think he is also stronger than Johnson, not more powerful with his punches, but stronger with his wrestling and his grip. If Johnson explodes in, Jones will find a way to get it into the clinch, trip out Anthony Johnson after throwing some knees and elbows, get him to the ground, and the fight's pretty much done from there. And prime GSP versus 5th round Robbie Lawler. So you're saying 1 round or 5th round Robbie for an entire 5-round fight? Like, that's the guy he is for the entire fight. Oh, I don't know, man. Because 5th round Robbie Lawler, a prime Robbie, had impeccable takedown defense, man. He was so good against wrestlers, and he had the power on his feet. Man, I don't even know what to think about that. Robbie's a southpaw fighter as well, so GSP's jab is not going to be as effective. But then he has the kicks, specifically the right high kick that Rory McDonald's using against Robbie Lawler. You know, I'll say GSP. I think the difference with Rory and GSP was mainly the footwork aspect of it. GSP's quick on his feet. He's explosive. And I think he'll be able to pop in strikes and get away from Lawler's counterpunches where Rory was not able to do that. So Rory took a lot of damage, unnecessary damage, for the duration of the fight. So I would say GSP would win, but it would be so exciting, man. Then we go to Anderson Porfirio. After Ngannou's last performance, do you still think Ngannou is a favorite against him? No, I don't think so. I think Ngannou would be the favorite. I do still think that Ngannou can beat Ciryl Gane, but I would not be shocked at all if Ciryl Gane beats him for 5 rounds. Like, outpoints him for the entire fight. One thing you could take away from the sparring, now it is only sparring, it was years ago, was the fact that Ngannou was able to find uppercuts on Ciryl Gane, whether you take that or not for what it's worth, because Ciryl Gane was ducking his head and try to push Francis Ngannou away whenever Ngannou got in on him, and that is a scary thing to see. I think if Ciryl Gane fights the perfect fight, I think he can absolutely win, but I just don't see that happening. I do see him making a mistake defensively and getting caught by Ngannou and probably getting knocked out cold, to be honest. Then with a solution plays. Who will dominate the lightweight division? Thoughts on Tony's future? The lightweight division is so good because it's so competitive. When Khabib was champion, it looked like he was going to shut out the entire division for a long time. But the fact that he retired so quickly, it puts the division back into the competitiveness that it's known for. Everybody in that top 5 can beat each other, right? Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, and Charles Oliveira. These guys can all beat each other. With the right fight at the right night, these guys are all very close in skill. So because of that, I don't think it's any of these guys. I think if anybody's going to dominate the lightweight division, it's going to be Islam Makhachev. A big reason for that is he is going to be probably the best grappler out of all of them. Charles Oliveira is the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, but he doesn't have the wrestling that Islam Makhachev has, and Islam also has the judo skills as well. He's the best overall grappler out of everybody there. And also, he's a pretty good striker, man. He's fast on his feet. He's fast with his hands. He's a southpaw, which is very different than Khabib. And he has the skills on the ground. He's a little bit more risk-taking when it comes to his submissions, whereas Khabib was more about positions. Even though he will go for submissions like mounted triangles and stuff, he has shown to be a lot more willing to stay in position than Islam Makhachev. But most of the other guys are just wrestlers or just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists when it comes to their grappling. And almost all of them are good strikers. And another big reason for this is most of the fighters in the top 5 are risk-taking even on the feet. Islam Makhachev is very defensively responsible everywhere. On the feet, on the ground, in the wrestling, all that stuff. He keeps pressure on you. He'll go in for that low single, just like Khabib used to do. So because of that, there's holes in everybody's game that Islam Makhachev can take control of, can take advantage of, whereas they can't exploit a lot of Islam's openings. So I think the guy that's going to dominate the division is probably going to be Islam Makhachev. And as for Tony's future, I don't think it's too bright, to be honest, man. With the change to Freddie Roach, training with GSP, it's great, but he's so old in this game now. He's taking so much damage. I think the game has surpassed him, to be honest. I think it's too late with the changes. And then we go to Brick Flair. If the Weasel weighed into each weight class, which opponent would you duck or not want to fight from each weight class? Also, Sean O'Malley versus Dominic Cruz, what's your early prediction? I wouldn't duck anybody, to be honest. If I am going to fight and compete, there would be nobody, not even Francis Ngannou. If I was a heavyweight, I would not duck Francis Ngannou. I would want to fight Francis Ngannou. I would want the toughest fights. I would want the scariest guys, because those are the biggest opportunities. I'm all for the risk taking. I'm all for fighting on the grandest stage in front of the bright lights. That is actually like the biggest thing that gets me excited about competing. Actually going under those lights and performing the best I can against the best guys in the world. That's what would really motivate me. And Sean O'Malley versus Dominic Cruz, I gotta go with Cruz, man. I honestly think it's too early for Sean O'Malley. He really hasn't fought wrestlers. Pretty much everybody he's fought so far has been a striker or has struck for the majority of the fight. And also look at the kind of guys he's fighting. Thomas Almeida, Marlon Vera, Eddie Wineland, Andre Sukumtat. These guys are plotters, man. They do not move. So it's easier for him to snipe them down and look for that big punch, look for the big kick, as they're kind of just standing in front of him. That is not the case with Dominick Cruz at the slightest. Trying to catch Cruz with those kind of attacks, I mean, it's like what Cruz is meant to go up against. That's what his style is good for. His style is great to go up against snipers and guys trying to knock him out with one big punch and stuff like that. So it's difficult enough to catch Cruz, just generally speaking, because of his head movement, the way he switches stances, and the patterns, the puzzle that he creates. But then add on the wrestling to it, where Sean O'Malley doesn't fight wrestlers. Those tricky shift double leg takedowns. He feints down to catch you over the top. He has the cardio to go 3 rounds at a very quick pace. How does O'Malley's cardio look when he's getting pushed for 3 rounds or 5 rounds? Usually it's him dictating the pace, and when you dictate the pace, you also get to dictate how your cardio is going to expend. When you get pushed faster than you're used to pacing yourself, you will gas out earlier. I don't know if Sean O'Malley's going to be fresh for 3 rounds. I really don't. I think 2 rounds, and then that last 3rd round, he's going to be a bit gassed, especially wrestling with Cruz and trying to keep up with him. Cruz is going to wing punches at him and be very active in front of him, where Sean O'Malley is going to have to react constantly. Right, Cruz is not going to pressure him, but he's going to make Sean O'Malley keep up with the activity the entire fight, or he's just going to lose on points. So I do think it's too early for Sean O'Malley to fight Dominick Cruz, to be honest. And then we're going to be real. Am I the only one who thinks that Burns is a nightmare matchup for Colby? How do you see that fight playing out? Yeah, I think so too. Burns is just a natural weakness to all wrestlers. Nobody wants to take him to the ground, and he's such a good striker. He's so fast and powerful. He just doesn't have the best chin. That's the thing. But Colby doesn't have big power, so it's not a problem, you know? Kamaru Usman has big power, and he just displayed that tremendous jab after getting rocked in the first round. So yeah, I do think Burns shuts down the wrestling completely. Colby exposes himself with long extended punches, long chains of combinations. Burns is just as fast as him, and he's way more powerful. He can also just spam leg kicks and not be worried about getting taken to the ground. He'll switch stances on Colby as well. He will try to take Colby to the ground, as we've seen RDA do the same thing. RDA took Colby down multiple times in their fight. That's a scary fight for Colby Covington, to be honest, and that's probably the fight that's going to happen. Or I don't even know. I mean, we have Leon Edwards out there. I don't know if they're going to do Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad again, but if they do that, let's say they do that rematch, then they're going to have to do Burns versus Colby. If I'm Colby, I want to fight Leon Edwards. I want to stay away from the Brazilian. And then we're going to Lee O'Loughlin. Jan has expressed interest in going up to heavyweight after a few title fights. How would Jan do against the top 10? Well, let's look at the rankings. Chris Daukaus, I think he's much more technical. He's very powerful. I think he's way too technical for Sakai. Walt Harris gasses out too quick. Jan is very durable. He has the wrestling to counter Walt's aggression, and he's far more technical on the feet. He's too good for Shamil just overall. He's not going to get taken to the ground, and he's far better striker with far more power. And then Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, this is where it gets difficult. Man, the top 6 is actually pretty nice. Heavyweight's not doing bad these days. I don't know where Rozenstruik's takedown defense is at, because Jan will attempt takedowns. Kickboxing with Rozenstruik is going to be difficult for Jan, given that Jan is not very fast and he doesn't have the best footwork to get away from Rozenstruik. So it's going to be a plodding striking match where both guys have tremendous power. Rozenstruik, I think, has a better chin and he has more power. So I don't know where Rozenstruik's takedown defense would be at. But I'll just say Jan Blachowicz due to him mixing up the game, but it's a very scary fight. Alexander Volkov, I think he beats Jan. He's very technical as well. I think he'll have relative power. He's fast with his hands. He's much longer, and he's not going to be taken to the ground that easily. Ciryl Gane. I'm going to go Ciryl Gane. I think he's very strong in the clinch. He'll not get caught off the exit. I think he's far more technical as a striker as well. He might be a little bit more powerful. Curtis Blades now. I think Jan could beat Curtis if he defends the takedown. I think he's a far better striker. I think he's more powerful as well. And he does have better cardio. So I'll go with Jan Blachowicz. Derek Lewis. Oh man, I can never predict his fights. It's just too hard. He has the highest puncher's chance out of anybody I've ever seen. Jan has the wrestling. Jan's very strategic. He doesn't put himself in that much danger, or at least potentially, if you look at the Israel Adesanya fight. He's very technical on his feet. He's powerful. But I'm going to go with Derek Lewis because it's Derek Lewis. Stipe Miocic. I got to go with Stipe. He's more powerful. He's a better boxer. He has better wrestling. He's not going to get taken to the ground. He's very durable. Yeah, I think Stipe is a tough fight for Jan Blachowicz. And Francis Ngannou, I think Ngannou knocks him out. And then we go to Alex. Fun matchups. Henry Cejudo versus Petr Yan. I gotta go with Cejudo. Gegard Mousasi versus Kamaru Usman. Gotta go with Usman. I think he dominates. Yoel Romero versus Jan Blachowicz. I gotta go with Blachowicz, even though it's a very scary fight. Anthony Rumble Johnson versus John Jones. I gotta go with Jones. Gillespie versus Islam Makhachev. I gotta go with Makhachev. I think it's a pretty easy fight for him. Figueiredo versus Demetrius Johnson. Oh, that's tough. I'll go DJ. Justin versus Dustin 2. Ah, man, I don't know. I'll lean Justin But to be honest with you, I'm 50-50 on that. Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. I go with Shevchenko. I think it's not that difficult for her. Gilbert Burns versus Colby. Gotta go with Gilbert. Till versus Costa. Gotta go with Till. Fiziev versus Lee. I gotta see more Fiziev. He's so good. Everybody's high on this guy. I'm very high on him as well. It's tough to say right now. I got to see him go up against that kind of wrestler with that kind of reach, that kind of experience. I think on paper, Fiziev should beat him. Lee also loses composure very quickly, so got to go with Fiziev. Emmett versus Kelvin Cater. I did not like the way Kelvin Cater fought Max Holloway. He had like no counters at all. He just allowed Max to completely take over the fight. I'm talking about early too, not late where he was already hurt. I'm talking about like he allowed Max to completely control the center of the cage. The only time he countered back was when he wanted to brawl, and that would not be good going up against Josh Emmett. So I'll go with Emmett, but I could definitely see where Kelvin Cater catches him. I think Emmett will start winning the fight. Kelvin Cater potentially could knock him out in some sequence later in the fight, but I'll go with Josh Emmett. Yuri versus Rakic. I'm going to go with Rakic. Font versus TJ. Oh, I'll go with TJ for sure. Wrestling's too much. He's so good as a striker. He's a better kicker. His boxing's nice too. Doesn't really leave himself that open. I think a prime TJ actually would dominate Font. And then we go to Junior. Number 1 is Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. The closest fight we'll ever get to Tony versus Khabib. Yeah, that's like the Walmart version of Tony versus Khabib. That's what we get. You know that one meme will be like, Mom, I want Tony versus Khabib. And then the mom goes, we got Tony versus Khabib at home. And then what you would get would be Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. That's not to discredit either of them. Obviously, Charles Oliveira beat Tony. Islam in the future might be better than Khabib. So that's just what it seems like right now. I'm still bummed out about Tony and Khabib. Number 2, if Tony Ferguson beats Islam Makhachev, would Khabib return? I don't know. I don't think so, to be honest. I think if Tony wins the belt and he beats everybody, that would be the time Khabib would come back. I don't think just being Makhachev would be enough for Khabib to come back. Number 3, if Tony Ferguson has a resurgence in his career and goes on to win the lightweight belt, where would you see him in the lightweight GOAT discussion? It also depends what he does, like who he beats on the way. Because Khabib is the best. Actually, right now, I can still make an argument that Tony Ferguson is the second greatest lightweight of all time. Even right now. It's hard to put anybody else in front of him, to be honest. When you really think about it, really think about who would be better than Tony, who has a better resume than Tony Ferguson, who would you put in front? You can't put RDA. You can't put Eddie Alvarez. You can't put Benson Henderson. You can't put BJ Penn. You can't put Frankie Edgar. I see some argument these days that Dustin Poirier possibly, but you can make an argument because of the guys that Dustin has beaten, but he never had that long win streak. He never had an extended win streak like Tony did. The longest Dustin ever went undefeated was like 4 fights, and he's lost plenty of times. So I'll say Tony is the second greatest, and with him getting the belt on the way there, it depends who he beats. If they go to Jumbo Dumbo, are you secretly picking the opposite of your picks for the main events? Because that curse is just becoming way too real. I don't know what's going on, man. Now, first of all, I don't care about predictions, as you guys all know, but for fun, like, it's weird. I get fights correct throughout the whole card, right? And then the main event is the opposite of who I picked. Now, the analysis, the breakdown of how I think the fight is going to go, or how each fighter can win the fight, generally tends to be pretty accurate. But my pick for the main event is never accurate. That main event curse is something else, man. And to be honest, I like it. It's kind of fun having the power to pick who wins. But do I secretly pick? No, I don't bet on fights according to who I pick. I focus on my analysis of the fight and correlate that with the betting odds, because there is never an absolute winner of a fight. Each fighter always has a chance. So I bring the chances with my analysis of how the fight can potentially go. How can each fighter win the fight? And if the odds are somewhat in correlation with my analysis, that's how I determine which fighter I'm going to bet on. I usually stay away from main events. Main events are probably some of the hardest fights to ever predict. It's usually the lower level fights that are easier to bet on, and they generally have the craziest odds to them. I usually stay away from the big fights unless the odds are pretty crazy. And then we go to AJC Golf. Who does Justin Gaethje fight next, or does he sit out until after Poirier versus Conor and Chandler versus Oliveira? He could wait it out, but I don't know if he wants to. I think he does want to fight someone. There's Islam Makhachev, there's RDA. I don't know if he wants those fights. He's coming off a loss, so maybe he understands that he can't just pick the best guys and the biggest fights in the world. So we might see him in something like that. I think they're going to do Makhachev versus RDA, so I like Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, to be honest. I don't like him waiting out too long, though. When those fights are going to be over, it's going to be after July. He's going to fight in the winter, probably, or the fall. That's almost an entire year after fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov. So I'll say for him, find the Dan Hooker fight, find RDA, or find Islam Makhachev. And then we go to MT. What would you rather have happen to you? Francis clapping you up with one to the head, or Holloway beating you up for 5 rounds? Love your vids, man. Thank you so much. I'll probably say the Francis one. One and done. Just get it over with. I don't want to remember it because against Max Holloway, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life. With Francis Ngannou, it will seem like a dream, like it never happened. With Holloway, you're getting a lot of cosmetic damage, micro concussions all over the place, and that can actually be worse than one big concussion. A Holloway beating can also destroy your confidence and make you question yourself, whereas getting hit by Francis once, you can create a delusion like, oh, he just caught me, I'm actually the better fighter, he just caught me, that's all it was. So I'd say Francis one to the head. That does not sound good. I'd rather get hit by Ngannou. They go to Yait. Usman versus Prime GSP at welterweight. Who you got winning? I got Kamaru Usman. The game has evolved so much. Different athlete, different power. Usman's so much bigger than him. GSP's going to have a very hard time taking him to the ground as well. The power from Usman is really going to hurt GSP, man, throughout the fight. Usman's going to put the kind of pressure on GSP that nobody else put on him. Right? Usman loves to stay in your face, bomb on you with that jab, big right hand, switch stances on you. It's an entirely different fight than GSP's ever been a part of. Then we go to Shantanu Sengupta. How do you see these generational fights going? So Till versus Prime Bisping, gotta go with Till. Stipe versus Prime Cro Cop, gotta go with Stipe. Izzy versus Prime Silva. Okay, this one's difficult. I'll go with Adesanya, but that would be more competitive than the other fights. Costa versus TRT Vitor. Oh, now this is different because this isn't just generational. TRT Vitor was ahead of his time. That guy was a monster. I actually say TRT Vitor. He's a very good counterpuncher. I think Costa would run into his punches, fall into a head kick. Costa's defense is not the best. And if your defense is not the best against TRT Vitor, you are going to get blitzed down and knocked out. I think TRT Vitor knocks him out. There is the whole crowding and brawling from Costa that can overwhelm TRT Vitor, but I don't think so. Derek Lewis versus Shane Carwin. Well, these guys are actually part of the same generation. It's just Lewis lasted longer. One punch, this fight's over. Maybe. Actually, Carwin had an insane chin. Granite chin. I think he could take a big shot from Lewis. I don't think Lewis can take a big shot from him. So I would say Carwin. Usman versus pre-USADA Johnny Hendricks. Usman all day. Hendricks is so short with his punches. I don't think he takes down Usman. Usman's much longer, better boxer. Jabs him in the face. Yeah, Usman for sure. And how well would Dominic Cruz have done in boxing considering the absence of leg kicks? I think he does pretty well. He's not going to become a champion or something. I think he'll win some fights with the lower level guys. Love from India, brother. Shout out to India, man. You guys are amazing. Then we're going to Kentaro Oe. I hope I pronounced that right. Seeing a lot of pure Muay Thai fighters getting bodied in MMA. What are the issues with that style in MMA? Mine is grappling. There's a lot of issues. It's a very different sport that they come from. So, number one, the gloves are different. In Muay Thai, they're very dependent on guarding, just like boxers for the most part. You can't really do that the same in MMA. Head kicks get around the glove very, very easily. The structure of a fight in MMA is also very different, where now fighters are moving around the place using a lot of elusive footwork, staying long so they can get in and out of the Muay Thai fighter. When they go to throw leg kicks on the longer guy, they can potentially get their kick caught, and that's where you see some of the grappling holes. And not only that, you generally tend to see a lot of Muay Thai fighters in this sport not mask their kicks too much. It's a lot of just naked kicks, and they expect returns. And that also has to do to the fact that the way fighters are moving these days is very fluid, very quick, constant elusiveness, and that creates a lot of angles on the Muay Thai fighter where they generally can't create the same kind of angles on their opponent, ultimately allowing the MMA fighter to kind of control how the fight goes. And the other thing is, Muay Thai has been a part of the sport for so long that traditional Muay Thai style has become not outdated, but the reliance on that style is outdated. You gotta add on to it. You gotta change things up. That's why fighters now are fighting way different than they were 10 years ago. That plodding back and forth, standing in front of your opponent Muay Thai style has mostly died out. Again, look what Sean O'Malley is doing to these guys. Look what he just did to Thomas Almeida for an example. That's a perfect example, actually. Thomas Almeida cannot catch up to him because of his ploddiness, so he starts winging out punches trying to get to him and getting caught by that pull left straight. Distance, space control, angles, all that stuff. The boxing are catching these Muay Thai fighters off guard when they're trying to find their offense. And even on the defense, feints have become such a big thing in this game now. If I'm simply feinting at you, changing stances, cutting you off on angles, I'm eventually going to find an opening on you. There's a lot of anticipation that can happen for the MMA fighter compared to the Muay Thai fighter when they're seeing all different kind of things all over the place. There's a good example of the opposite happening with Jan Blachowicz. For an example, Jan Blachowicz is that more kickboxing-oriented fighter who kind of stands in front of you, not a lot of movement and stuff like that. His defense has become so impeccable these days where he's able to get away and not fall under the feints. He's a little bit more of an outlier compared to the other guys you see in the sport. Then what is Simon Y? How underrated is Brunson's wrestling? He was able to take down and control Yoel Romero for most of their fight. It's definitely better than people give it credit. He's not the best wrestler we've ever seen, but he's very capable against pretty much anybody besides Adesanya. But then again, that was a Derek Brunson who rushed opponents, and I think Adesanya also got into his head a bit. You can see Brunson was tripping over his feet for the takedowns. losing footing completely. He's definitely the best wrestler right now in that division, but I don't think he's good enough to take down guys like Whitaker, probably even Darren Till, some of these guys with better takedown defense. I think you could take down Jared Cannonier, for an example, and maybe even Paulo Costa. But the other guys, it's going to be very difficult. Even Adesanya has a really good takedown defense. Then with a Colin Fahey, if Aljo actually beats Jan in the rematch, how do you see his title run going, and how do you think it will end? I don't see him holding the belt that long, to be honest. I think TJ Dillashaw is a very tough fight for him. I think even Dominic Cruz would be relatively difficult. I don't think he'll get shut out by anybody. If he's going to get shut out, it's going to be by Petr Yan. TJ could shut him out, depending how TJ shows up against Corey Sandhagen. But everyone else, he's pretty competitive with. Even because of the competitiveness, that alone tells you that Aljamain Sterling is probably not going to hold the title that long. The way I see him losing is getting absolutely shut out, though, by Petr Yan or by TJ Dillashaw. So he beats Petr Yan in his first title defense. Depending on who wins between Corey Sandhagen and TJ Dillashaw, probably dictates as to whether Aljamain Sterling will win or lose his next fight, because I think he'll be more favored to beat Corey Sandhagen in the rematch than to defeat TJ Dillashaw because of the difference in grappling, difference in wrestling. TJ's a hard guy to take to the ground. He's a much better striker than Aljamain Sterling. He's a very good grappler himself. Corey Sandhagen showed maybe not the best grappling, at least not on the level of TJ and Aljamain Sterling, so that route would be better for Aljo to get another title defense as a champion. Then with FK Breeze, what difference would you see in Masvidal's game plan in the rematch with Usman, considering he has now 5 weeks to prepare for this fight? I don't see too much other than he's not going to throw kicks right at the beginning of the fight because that hurt him. I don't know why he came out the gates throwing leg kicks and body kicks at a wrestler who he knew the best way for Usman to beat him is using his wrestling. So he pretty much just gave Usman the takedown right in the beginning of the fight. Without that, I do see the fight being relatively the same. Masvidal still sticks on the defense when he's getting pressured, and that has never really changed in his career. He's a little bit better at throwing back, but as you've seen against Usman, Nate Diaz, some of his most recent fights, Masvidal will stick on the defense and not return that often. In conclusion, makes him very inactive in the fight. So Jorge's game plan is going to have to revolve around being more active in the fight, but then again, he could get tired just like he did in the first one. Didn't have the 5-week preparation for Kamaru Usman, but he was training. I do hear the excuses that he wasn't training, but weeks before that fight happened, he was posting that he was training and specifically training wrestling. I don't know how extensively he was doing it, but he wasn't just sitting on the couch. Having more active hands against Usman without throwing many kicks is going to be a huge thing for Jorge Masvidal. Setting up the big right overhand, probably similar to what Gilbert Burns did against Usman, using his speed advantage, getting in there with flurries, and being conscious of the double leg takedown at every given moment. Whenever he goes to attack, he's going to have to expect that Usman is going to look to tie him up or go in for the takedown. It's going to be tough, no matter how he approaches the fight. I honestly think on fight night, it's not going to look that differently unless Usman fights differently. If Usman fights differently, then we have another fight on our hands. But if he comes out there with the same game plan, I don't know what else Jorge can do to Kamaru Usman, to be honest. And then we go to Lander Lowe. I'm hearing a lot of excuses for Stipe losing, such as his weight was too low, small octagon, wars with DC ruined his chin, he's old. Is there validation to any of these? Why no love for Ngannou? Yeah, none of these I think made a difference. In fact, the small octagon would make it easier for him to drive it to the cage for the takedown, which he actually did. Drove it to the cage, but Ngannou's takedown defense was too strong. Being low in weight is actually better for Stipe going into the fight. And Francis acknowledged that as well. Francis wanted to be smaller in this fight. He just said he couldn't drop the weight. Stipe also showed to have a great chin in the fight. He took huge shots that nobody else is really able to take. So I don't think his chin was ruined by DC. He just ate a punch he did not see coming. He ran into it as well. Double the damage. And he's old. No, Stipe has been getting better. I think the opposite is true for all of that. For all of these excuses, the opposite is true. Francis was just a better fighter. That's just what it was. And this happens all the time. It's not something to knock anybody for saying this, but like, as it always happens, when there's a dominant champion or a lot of people like a certain fighter, excuses are going to be made. When most of the time, the excuses have no validation and it's just that their opponent was better than them. There are some cases where the excuses are valid, but in this case, they're not. And it's good to see even Stipe Miocic is not giving into any excuses. He just said he got caught. He made a mistake in the fight. Francis capitalized. Francis was the better fighter, and that's it. And that is actually the truth. We all love Stipe, but we gotta see how it is, man. Francis Ngannou beat the best version of Stipe Miocic, fair and square too. Then with a Daniel Silva. Kamaru Usman's cardio is unbelievable considering his explosive power. Do you think he is natural? Because he's been part of USADA for a while and has never failed a drug test, I gotta say he is natural. It is a little bit weird regarding his physique, his ability to go 5 rounds easily, and his ability to explode into his punches and deliver that kind of power. Yeah, it is not something you normally see. Like, for instance, Francis Ngannou, right? Francis Ngannou has that explosive power, he has the physique, but the guy gasses out. There's usually a balance between every single fighter. Then you have someone like Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is not that powerful, he's not explosive, but he can last forever. He never gets tired. Usman has all of the attributes. In theory, it doesn't sound like it would be natural, but there is no evidence that he is unnatural. Then went to Emil De Meyer. How do you feel about Gastelum replacing Costa in the fight with Robert Whittaker? For Whittaker, I don't like it, but as a fan, I like it because this was a fight that I was waiting for a long time, man. They were supposed to fight when Whittaker was the champion. Costa was an easier fight, 100%. Robert Whittaker would probably have ran through Paulo Costa. He can't against Kelvin Gastelum. Nobody runs through Kelvin Gastelum. The guy's too powerful. He's a good wrestler. He's so durable. Extremely fast hands for the division. Can keep up with Robert Whittaker specifically. He doesn't make the same mistakes that Paulo Costa does. In that sense, it's a harder fight for Robert Whittaker with the same pay, and Gastelum is not as highly ranked. All in all, it's a worse fight for Robert Whittaker, no matter how you look at it, to be honest. Except for the competitiveness as a fan, everything else is worse for Whittaker. He's taken a harder fight against a lesser ranked fighter for the same pay. And no matter beating Paulo Costa or beating Kelvin Gastelum, he should be getting a title shot. So I like the fight because I've been anticipating for a while, but if you're in Whittaker's corner, you're probably not too happy about this one. Then with a Water Lotus. Who has more chance of winning? Masvidal versus Usman or McGregor versus Khabib? I'll say Masvidal versus Usman. I do think it's kind of similar, but Masvidal probably a couple percentage points higher of beating Usman compared to McGregor beating Khabib. And then the last question, we're going to go to Parzival. Which one of these prospects contenders is most likely to become a champion? Islam Makhachev, Cyril Gane, Rafael Fiziev, Hamza Chimaev, or Magomed Ankalaev? That's so tough because I can see all of these guys becoming a champion. I will say Cyril Gane, given the fact that he's the highest ranked guy there, and the heavyweight division is not as difficult to go through as these lighter divisions that these guys are in. But there is Magomed Ankalaev as well. He's kind of a similar position. Not as highly ranked, but the division is even shallower than the heavyweight division. So I'll say Cyril Gane. Number 2, who in the UFC right now is most likely to become the next champ? Doesn't have to be a champion right now. I'd probably say Deiveson Figueiredo has the best chance as of now. Petr Yan, if he wants to go up to featherweight, could have a pretty decent chance as well. And even Volkanovski going up to 155. He can handle a lot of those guys up there. I'll say Figgy as of right now. And number 3, fantasy matchups. Usman versus Whittaker at 185. I got to go with Whittaker. Holloway versus Volkanovski 3. I'm going to go with Volkanovski. Yan versus Sandhagen. I'm going to go with Yan. Stipe versus Jones. I'm going to go with Jones. And Dustin versus Conor 3. Oh man, I'm so 50-50. I'll go with Conor McGregor. I'll lean Conor. So that's the end of the podcast, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you listen to the audio version of this. And I'll see you guys in the next video.